This isn't a fairy tale. This is a part of Meghan Markle's story that was buried, erased, and scrubbed clean, and the man who lived it has been silent for years, until now. From the very beginning, the pattern was always the same. What Meghan wants, Meghan gets, and what Meghan doesn't want, she discards without a second glance. That single rule explains everything that happened before royalty, before palace press offices, before carefully rehearsed speeches and saintly rebrands. Long before Prince Harry, there was Trevor Engelson, and he saw the raw version no one was meant to see.
Yes, thank you so much.
Her first husband, Trevor Engelson, and you are not going to believe.
They met in 2006, 5 years together, married in 2011, divorced by 2014. On paper, it sounds ordinary, but behind the scenes, this was not a love story, it was a ladder. Trevor wasn't just a husband, he was a bridge to the next level. And once that level was reached, the bridge was burned. Trevor knew Meghan before the polish, before Suits, before the reinvention, before the cleanup job, but before the nose job. He knew her when ambition was louder than empathy, when hunger for fame overpowered loyalty, when every room was evaluated for usefulness. And according to those who knew them back then, Trevor wasn't blindsided, he was slowly phased out. While Meghan chased opportunity, Trevor watched distance replace intimacy. When Suits entered the picture, filming in Toronto became the perfect excuse. Living apart wasn't framed as abandonment, it was framed as sacrifice. Career came first, marriage came second, and love was optional.
According to a friend who knew Meghan back in the day when she had her.
Then came the quietest divorce imaginable. No joint statements, no public heartbreak, no messy fallout, just silence. Rumors say she mailed the ring back. No conversation, no closure. A symbolic gesture that said everything without saying a word. For someone who would later preach compassion, kindness, and respect, it was ice cold. And here's where the timeline starts to feel uncomfortable. Not long after the marriage ended, Meghan was suddenly linked to Prince Harry, a blind date, they said. A coincidence, they said. But people who were watching closely noticed how fast the upgrade happened. One door closed, another flew open. And Trevor? He became a chapter better left unmentioned. Toronto wasn't just a filming location, it was a playground. Behind the scenes, Toronto nightlife had its own language, its own codes, its own rituals. And according to multiple whispers, Meghan wasn't just attending, she was organizing.
Hi, Katie. I heard that you have a great podcast that just came out.
Hosting, curating rooms filled with the right people, the right access, the right influence. Parties weren't parties, they were auditions without scripts. This is where Soho House enters the story not as a rumor, but as a recurring backdrop. A place where power mingled freely, where discretion was currency, where favors were understood without being spoken. To outsiders, it looked exclusive. To insiders, it was transactional. And Meghan, she knew exactly how to navigate it. She had a vision board, she had goals, and she had the willingness to be ruthless enough to reach them. People who were there say she moved through rooms like she owned them, not wandering, not observing, controlling, hosting, directing. Invitations didn't just happen, they came through her. And on one particular night, whispers say the gathering crossed lines that directly contradict the image she later sold to the world. What makes this even more explosive is who was allegedly present. Whispers of royal blood in those rooms. Whispers that, if confirmed, would shake palace walls. The idea that a prince and a princess could be linked to something so quietly scandalous wasn't just shocking, it was catastrophic. And Meghan wasn't a bystander. She wasn't passing through. According to alleged partygoers, she was the reason it happened. To the public eye, this doesn't align with the Meghan we were later introduced to. But to those who knew her then, they say it's completely on brand. They say there were always two Meghans, the public feminist wellness advocate, and the private social climber who understood that proximity to power was the fastest currency. And here's the part nobody likes to talk about. Prince Harry may not have been blind to any of this. Maybe he wasn't deceived. Maybe he was drawn to it. Harry has never been untouched by scandal. He's spoken openly about rebellion, excess, and resentment toward palace control. Perhaps what attracted him wasn't innocence, but familiarity. A shared appetite for pushing boundaries, a shared resentment for rules. Patterns don't lie. And Meghan's pattern was already well established. Long before palace life, people noticed how friendships vanished, how collaborators disappeared, how entire chapters of her past were wiped clean like they never existed, photos removed, histories rewritten, names never mentioned again. It wasn't chaos, it was strategy. Trevor witnessed this firsthand. Their divorce wasn't just a separation, it was an upgrade. He represented an earlier model. And when the new version arrived, the old one was discarded, quietly, efficiently, without explanation. No screaming matches, no public drama, just silence. That silence wasn't accidental, it was a social erasure. Messages unanswered, invitations stopped, calls ignored, a slow, deliberate disappearance. People weren't attacked, they were erased. And those erased often stayed quiet because they didn't understand what had happened until it was already over. Usefulness expired, relationship expired. And this is where the discomfort deepens. Timelines start shifting, dates blur, stories evolve, ages become flexible, narratives get cleaner. Some believe this wasn't coincidence, but editing. A fairy tale arc plays better when rough edges are removed, and paperwork can be adjusted, but memory can't. Toronto remembers, Hollywood remembers, ex-friends remember, staff remember, ex-lovers remember, and Trevor Engelson, he remembers everything. He saw the ambition before the crown, the hunger before the headlines, the willingness to burn bridges without turning back. And while he's largely remained silent, that silence doesn't mean ignorance, it means restraint. And restraint in stories like this is the loudest warning of all. What makes this story dangerous isn't just what happened, it's how cleanly it was buried. Reinvention didn't start with royalty, it was already a perfected skill long before palace gates ever opened. Meghan didn't stumble into a new life, she edited her way into one. Every reinvention followed the same blueprint: erase the past, relaunch the narrative, discredit anyone who remembers differently. And this is where the silence of Trevor Engelson becomes impossible to ignore. Because Trevor isn't just an ex-husband, he's a living archive. He represents the era before the edit, before the speeches were vetted, before every word was polished to weaponized vulnerability. He knew the ambition when it wasn't dressed up as empowerment. He knew the hunger before it was repackaged as destiny. People love to dismiss exes. It's easy, bitter, jealous, irrelevant. Trevor didn't talk. He didn't leak. He didn't chase attention. He remarried. He moved on. He watched from a distance as the woman he once knew was reborn as something almost unrecognizable. And that restraint, that's what terrifies people. Because those who scream usually have nothing to say. Those who stay quiet usually have everything. As Meghan's public image ascended, something else happened quietly in the background. People from her past started comparing notes. Toronto insiders, former friends, industry acquaintances, people who had once been close suddenly realized they all shared the same experience: the cutoff. No argument, no explanation, just disappearance. Calls unanswered, messages left on read, invitations stopped arriving, social media wiped, photos gone, like they'd never existed. It wasn't emotional, it was operational. A social death executed with surgical precision. And here's the part no one likes admitting: it worked. For a long time, it worked beautifully. The world met a new Meghan, humanitarian, feminist, victim, survivor, trailblazer, each version deployed strategically depending on the room. If challenged, critics were dismissed as hateful, jealous, or morally defective. Narrative control became armor, and anyone who questioned it was made radioactive. But there's a problem with reinvention. It relies on collective amnesia, and amnesia never lasts forever. Because witnesses don't disappear, they age, they move on, they get quieter, but they don't forget. And when enough memories collide, the truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to exist. People began noticing inconsistencies, timelines that shifted, stories that evolved depending on the interviewer, dates that blurred, records that seemed conveniently vague. Some chalked it up to harmless confusion, others weren't so sure. Was it coincidence or curation? A younger Nave Girl narrative sells better than a seasoned social climber story. Lost records help, missing details help, selective memory helps, but paperwork can't erase lived experience. And Toronto remembers, Hollywood remembers, staff remember, ex-friends remember, ex-lovers remember. They remember the rooms where power was currency, where parties weren't about fun, they were about leverage. They remember favors exchanged quietly, secrets kept because names mattered more than truth, allegations whispered openly but never written down. And they remember how quickly Meghan learned which rooms mattered and which ones didn't. What's unsettling is how deliberate it all looks in hindsight. Where she is now wasn't luck, it wasn't fate, it wasn't destiny. It was a series of calculated decisions, some cold, some ruthless, all strategic. She studied power the way others study scripts. She learned proximity. She learned timing. She learned when to stay and when to vanish. Changing narratives became second nature. Victim when it suited, survivor when it helped, trailblazer when it sold. Each version polished, each version protected. And underneath it all, there's a discomfort people can't quite articulate. The sense that something doesn't align, that the performance is flawless, but the math doesn't add up. And no amount of branding can fully suppress that instinct. Truth has a smell, you can spray perfume over it, you can distract from it, you can deny it, but eventually it leaks through the cracks. Trevor Engelson is the embodiment of that crack. Not because he's spoken, but because he hasn't. He watched a woman he once loved rewrite herself in real time. He watched connections disappear. He watched loyalty replaced by utility. He watched ambition overpower attachment. And he knows exactly where the story stopped being honest. Silence in this case isn't forgiveness, it's containment. And containment always fails eventually. The irony is brutal. The very skill that built Meghan's ascent may be the thing that destabilizes it. Reinvention works until the past pushes back. Scrubbing history works until enough people remember at the same time. Cutting people off works until those people realize they were never alone. Because people remember, they always do. And when silence is no longer enough to contain the weight of those memories, the truth doesn't need a press release, it doesn't need a confession, it doesn't need an expose, it just needs time. Underneath the glossy branding, the humanitarian headlines, and the carefully staged vulnerability, there's a story that refuses to stay buried. A story made of erased faces, severed ties, rewritten timelines, and truths that were inconvenient. And no matter how far someone climbs, no matter how powerful the platform, the past has a way of waiting patiently in the shadows. Because the most dangerous secrets aren't the ones people shout. They're the ones everyone quietly agrees not to say until the moment silence finally breaks.